What if everything you believed about death was wrong, not entirely, but subtly, devastatingly so? Not a bold lie, but a veiled distortion, one so deeply embedded in your spiritual inheritance that you've never thought to question it. Imagine that the stories you've heard since childhood about moving toward the light, reuniting with loved ones, ascending to paradise, all of it were part of an ancient illusion. Not a malicious myth, but a mechanism, a spiritual architecture carefully constructed to keep the soul in motion but never in freedom. For the Gnostics, those early mystics branded as heretics and buried by empires, this wasn't just a theory. It was a warning, a secret truth so potent that its mere remembrance could unravel the entire prison of existence. Before we dive deeper, pause with this question. What if death is not the end but the oldest illusion of all? If you felt a chill reading these words, you're already sensing what the Gnostics tried to tell us. So take a moment, subscribe to this channel if these mysteries pull you in. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. You'll be surprised how many are waking up across the world together. And if this idea that death may not be the freedom we've been promised resonates with you, share this video. Let others know you're not afraid to question the light. Let's see how many of us recognize the trap hidden in the title. Long before institutional religion codified heaven and hell, the Gnostics whispered of a far more unsettling reality. According to the texts unearthed in the caves of Nag Hammadi in 1945, what we call life may not be the gift of a benevolent creator, but the imitation of one, a counterfeit universe designed by an ignorant architect. This being, known as the Demiurge, is not evil in the dramatic sense but is blind, arrogant, and unaware of the higher reality above him. And it is in that blindness that he fashions the material world, a glittering yet dense labyrinth populated by his emissaries, the Archons. These are not demons in the conventional sense, but cosmic bureaucrats, enforcers of illusion, keepers of the soul's amnesia. The Gnostics believed we are all sparks of divine essence, fragments of a realm called the pleroma, trapped in forms not of our choosing, wandering a world we were never meant to call home. According to the myth, it was Sophia, the embodiment of divine wisdom, who in her longing to create apart from the source, gave birth to the Demiurge. It was not malice that moved her, but curiosity, an almost human desire to understand creation directly. But creation without balance leads to distortion. The Demiurge, unaware of the realms above, proclaimed himself the one true God. "I am the only one," he declared, a claim echoed in scriptures later adopted by orthodoxy. And thus began the great deception, the material world beautiful, yes, but also impermanent, painful, endlessly cyclical, was mistaken for the totality of existence. This cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, the reincarnation wheel, is not, in the Gnostic view, a sacred school for the soul. It is a trap, a brilliant mechanism that feeds on human experience, suffering, and ignorance. With each rebirth, the soul forgets more of its origin. The dream deepens, the identity thickens, the illusion sharpens, and the prison walls become indistinguishable from reality itself. It is this forgetting that maintains the trap, and it is remembrance, gnosis, or direct knowing, that dissolves it. The idea of reincarnation is not unique to Gnosticism. Hinduism, Buddhism, and even early strands of Christianity flirted with the idea that the soul returns, again and again, to learn, to evolve, to refine. But the Gnostics asked a sharper question: what if the wheel was not designed for liberation but for repetition? In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, souls are warned of dazzling lights and voices that appear after death, luring them back toward rebirth. The Gnostics saw similar patterns. They believed these post-death phenomena were not pathways to heaven but mirrors, designed to seduce the soul back into embodiment. Even Origen, one of the early Christian thinkers, explored the idea of the soul's pre-existence and return, ideas later condemned as dangerous and heretical. But why were these teachings so eagerly suppressed? Because a soul that fears death is easier to control. A soul that believes it must return to fix itself is less likely to rebel. But a soul that remembers it was never meant to be trapped at all, that is a threat to the entire system. Imagine now the architecture of this cosmic illusion. The Demiurge builds a world that mimics beauty and wonder. A world that stirs emotion and longing. He gives it laws and seasons, pleasure and pain. But behind it all lies control. Souls are recycled not because they fail to grow, but because the very system demands their return. The Archons, invisible wardens, guard the thresholds between worlds, ensuring the soul forgets its origin before each incarnation. They appear as light beings, ancestors, even gods, forms the soul trusts, forms that disarm its vigilance. And so the game continues. Life after life, death after death. A play of endless scenes in which the actor forgets it is acting at all. The boldness of the Gnostic myth is not just in its metaphysics but in its emotional realism. It speaks to a quiet despair many feel but cannot name, the sense that something is deeply off. That reality itself feels staged, scripted, and inescapably familiar. Have you ever felt that strange déjà vu? Not tied to memory, but to existence itself? That eerie sense that you've played this role before, not just in this life but across many? The Gnostics would say that is your soul whispering through the veil, a distant echo from a place beyond time and form. And so, if death is not the end but part of the illusion, then the question becomes not just what happens after we die, but why? Who benefits? What force needs your return? The Gnostics offered a staggering answer: the Demiurge feeds on it. Not in the vampiric sense, but as sustenance for his dominion. The souls that cycle endlessly through the wheel power the illusion. They animate the material matrix. They give weight to the world that would otherwise crumble under the gaze of awakened remembrance. For every soul that forgets, the system is reinforced. But for every soul that remembers, cracks begin to appear. It's no wonder then that the Gnostics were hunted, burned, and erased from official history. Their message was not one of obedience, but of insurrection, a spiritual revolt against the architect of illusion. They called themselves strangers, wanderers in a world not their own. Their texts were not just mystical poetry but survival manuals for the soul. Hidden in symbols and metaphors were maps of escape, instructions for how to pass through death without being caught. They did not speak of sin and salvation in the conventional sense. They spoke of awakening, of seeing clearly, of piercing through the dream to remember the realm of light. But even within this darkness, they held hope, not in a savior descending from the sky, but in the light buried deep within the soul itself. The spark, that fragment of the true source, never dies. It only forgets. And with remembrance comes power. The power to resist the false light, the power to reject the seductive voices, the power to ascend beyond the prison walls. For the Demiurge can bind only those who identify with what he created. But he cannot touch the soul that knows it was never his to own. When the final breath leaves the body and the heartbeat fades into silence, something remarkable begins. For a moment, the soul feels weightless, untethered from the heaviness of flesh, free from pain and fear. Many who have touched the edge of death speak of a radiant tunnel, a loving light that pulls them with warmth and peace. Smiling faces, loved ones long gone, seem to welcome them back. It feels like home, like a return. But what if it isn't? What if this luminous scene, so universally comforting, is the first step back into the trap? The Gnostics would interrupt this moment with fierce clarity. Be careful, soul. Not all that shines is light, according to their sacred texts. This welcoming glow so common in near-death experiences is a facade, a luminous snare constructed by the Archons, agents of the Demiurge, designed to seduce the soul back into the cycle of reincarnation. In this view, the tunnel is not a bridge to heaven but a corridor of return, a technological marvel of illusion woven by powers that feed on forgetfulness. The familiar voices? Not truly your ancestors, but masks worn by forces who understand your deepest emotional patterns. They reflect your memories back at you like mirrors. Not to comfort but to distract. This spiritual deception is powerful precisely because it feels so personal. It is made of your own longing, your desire for reunion, your yearning for safety, for love, for closure. But behind that desire, according to Gnostic insight, lies the genius of the trap. You do not question what makes you feel comforted. You surrender to it. That surrender becomes the key that locks the door again. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most famous Gnostic texts, details how the Demiurge and his Archons constructed multiple layers of deception around the soul. These are not merely metaphysical barriers but psychological ones, emotional hooks that pull the soul back down. The hypostasis of the Archons speaks of rulers who bind humanity through forgetfulness. The pistis Sophia describes the soul's perilous journey through realms of judgment and false lights. Realms that test not righteousness but awareness. The lesson is clear: the afterlife is not neutral territory. It is contested space, shaped by forces that care less about your moral deeds and more about your level of recognition, whether you remember your divine origin, or whether you believe in the false dream. So what truly happens after death? If the Gnostics are correct, according to this view, death does not usher in liberation. Instead, it initiates a sequence, a patterned unfolding of illusion. First, the light, then, the voices, then, often, the life review, a deeply emotional experience in which you are shown your actions, made to feel the emotions of those you've affected, and urged to learn more, to try again. This moment, seemingly full of compassion and justice, is, according to Gnostic thought, the second act of the trap. Because here's the question: who is showing you this review? Who benefits if you feel guilt, remorse, or unfinished obligation? The answer, say the Gnostics, is chilling. The review is not conducted by benevolent guides but by the very same archonic forces that seek your return. They exploit your conscience. They twist your genuine desire to grow into a reason to descend. You have more lessons to learn. They whisper, return, try again. And with that belief, the soul is bound once more. It enters a new body. The veil of forgetfulness descends, and the game resets. Karma, in the Gnostic worldview, is not a sacred system of justice but a control algorithm, a web of energetic entanglement that binds souls to the material realm. Every action, every thought, becomes another thread in the net. The more you seek balance through doing, the more tightly you're woven into the fabric of illusion. It is not unlike a spider's web. The more you struggle to escape through action and effort, the more entangled you become. The Gnostics did not reject morality, but they were suspicious of any system that claimed liberation through endless doing. In their view, true freedom begins when you stop playing the game entirely. Think of the process like a cosmic courtroom drama. Only the judge, the jury, and the prosecutor are all employees of the same system. You stand accused, not by your essence, but by projections designed to evoke your compliance. You are convinced of your guilt and sentenced to try again, not because it's fair, but because your belief fuels the cycle. And so, lifetime after lifetime, you return, not to ascend but to repeat. The illusion is brilliant. It appears as a school. In truth, it is a prison with lessons that never end. And yet, few question it. Even in modern spiritual circles, the reincarnation cycle is portrayed as noble and purposeful. You chose this life, they say. You agreed to learn these lessons, but what if you didn't? What if that belief was implanted? A story whispered into your soul's ear by the Archons? The Gnostics would argue that consent, under deception, is not consent at all. It is compliance dressed as choice. It is spiritual gaslighting on a cosmic scale. The modern New Age movement, for all its light and positivity, may unconsciously echo the same narratives the Gnostics warned against. It focuses on healing wounds, clearing karma, attracting abundance, raising vibration, but all within the confines of the same matrix reality. Rarely does it suggest stepping outside the cycle entirely. Rarely does it teach the soul to remember its origin beyond this entire construct. In that sense, even modern enlightenment may be just another layer of the trap, a shinier cage with soothing words. The Gnostics were not pessimists. They were realists of the soul. They understood that truth, however uncomfortable, was the first step toward liberation. And their vision of post-death deception was not meant to frighten, but to awaken. Because only a soul that sees through the false light can resist its pull. Only a soul that doubts the judgment can question the authority behind it. Only a soul that knows its spark comes from beyond the Demiurge can rise above his domain. They taught that the soul must become lucid, not just in life, but in death. Just as one might train for lucid dreaming to recognize the dream state and choose within it, so too must the soul train for death. To see the tunnel and ask, is this true light? To hear the voices and wonder, are these truly mine? To witness the review and declare, I need not return. This isn't rebellion, it is remembrance. The great act of spiritual sovereignty is not to disobey authority, but to recognize the illusion of authority altogether. So, if the trap is maintained through emotion, memory, and belief, the tools of escape must be their opposites: stillness, clarity, and inner knowing. Not cold detachment, but radiant awareness, the kind that sees without judgment, loves without clinging, and remembers without fear. This is why the Gnostics valued Gnosis above all else, not knowledge from books or rituals, but the living knowledge that you are not what dies, you are not what returns, you are what sees both. If the trap of reincarnation is real, if death is not the grand liberation but a carefully masked illusion, then the most urgent question becomes, how do we escape? The Gnostics did not leave us without a map. They were not prophets of doom but torchbearers in the dark, lighting the way for any soul courageous enough to remember. The key, they said, lies not in rituals or dogma, not in good deeds tallied or punishments avoided, but in something more subtle and powerful: remembrance. Gnosis, the direct, piercing recognition that you are not a product of this world. You are not the body. You are not the name. You are not even the story. You are a spark from the pleroma, the eternal source beyond all form. This is not abstract mysticism. It is practical, urgent guidance. Because when death comes, and it will come dressed in images tailored to your psyche. Your childhood dog, your mother's voice, a shimmering figure of your God, all of it designed to make you trust, to surrender, to walk into the light. And unless you've trained yourself to see beyond appearances, unless you've remembered your true origin, the trap will trigger again. The tunnel will open, the wheel will spin, and you'll wake up in a crib with no memory of who you once were. But if you remember, truly remember, the illusion begins to break. The Archons lose their grip. They feed on ignorance, on confusion, on identification with form. The more you believe you are this personality, this gender, this life, the easier it is for them to lure you back. But the moment you say, I am not this, with clarity, with conviction, the rules shift. You become unbound. This is why the Gnostics spoke of sacred names and seals, not as passwords in the literal sense, but as inner declarations of sovereignty. To know the secret name is to know your origin. To speak it, not with words but with being, is to become immune to the snare. In the first apocalypse of James, a soul ascending through the realms is confronted by rulers who challenge it. But the soul does not cower. It declares its lineage, its knowledge of the higher realms. I come from the One. I belong to the light. This is not a metaphor. It is a rehearsal, a script written for the soul to practice while still in the body, so that, when the moment comes, it does not forget. Because the trap is not sprung by violence, but by forgetting. That is the Demiurge's greatest power, not to destroy, but to distract. How then do we train for remembrance? The Gnostics offered many paths, but all shared one core principle: awareness. Not constant striving, not seeking signs or miracles, but cultivating the quiet, steady fire of attention. When you watch your thoughts, not as you, but as the witness behind them, you begin to loosen the chains. When you sit in stillness and simply ask, "Who am I?" before the thought arises, you begin to remember. This is not philosophy. It is practice, a spiritual muscle you build every day. In modern terms, this might look like meditation, contemplation, or even silent walking. But it's not about the method. It's about the inner orientation. You are not trying to escape life. You are trying to see through it. Every illusion pierced here becomes armor in the beyond. Every moment you dissolve identity, soften attachments, quiet your ego, that becomes preparation. Because the more you identify with the eternal now, the less power the illusions will have later. You won't need to memorize Gnostic scriptures or chant ancient words. You'll simply know. Try this. Imagine yourself at the moment of death. The body has fallen away. You float in a vast field of light. A voice calls your name. A tunnel opens, warm and radiant. Do you follow it? Or do you stop and ask, whose light is this? Do you feel drawn or do you discern? Can you feel the difference between comfort and truth? Between seduction and sovereignty? That is the training. That is Gnosis. Not blind faith, but lucid attention. The Gnostics also spoke of releasing the world not in bitterness, but in clarity. They were not nihilists. They lived, loved, and felt deeply. But they did not cling. They saw form for what it was: temporary, beautiful, and unreal. Detachment was not indifference. It was freedom. They could move through the world without being of it. And that, too, was part of the training. The less you crave earthly outcomes, the less the Archons can hook you with unfinished business, the less you seek external validation, the more you awaken the truth that you are already complete. Many spiritual seekers focus on raising vibration or manifesting reality. But from the Gnostic lens, even this can become entrapment, because what you create within the illusion still serves the illusion. The true liberation is not in mastering the dream but in waking up from it. The Demiurge does not fear power. He fears remembrance. A powerful soul asleep is still useful. A quiet soul awake is a revolution. And this awakening doesn't begin after death. It starts now. In the breath you are taking, in the thought you just noticed, in the moment you remember, I am not this. Each moment of remembrance is a crack in the prison walls. Each act of presence, a blow to the false system. This is why Gnosis was not just about ideas. It was about being. The soul must become what it remembers: light, clarity, presence. Only then can it pass through the final illusion and emerge beyond the cycle. So ask yourself, again and again, will I recognize the false light? Let this question follow you like a companion. Let it shape how you love, how you release, how you see yourself and others. Because every choice you make now, every moment you choose truth over comfort, is a rehearsal for the moment the tunnel opens. And when it does, and the voices call you home, you will pause. You will remember. You will not walk into the trap smiling. You will turn and ascend. And perhaps that is the greatest secret the Gnostics guarded. That the trap is only strong while you forget. That the light only deceives when you do not ask who lit it. And that the soul, once awakened, becomes the only thing in the cosmos the Demiurge cannot control. Not through defiance, but through memory. Not through conquest, but through stillness. The soul that knows it comes from the source cannot be caged. It does not need escape. It simply rises.